we have over the series of different shurim and discussions that many of us had, mentioned the Shalom HaKodesh, who teaches us that we have a Masorah, the tradition that whatever happens during the course of the week has to do with the Parsha of that week. Of course, a source of continuing excitement, exhilaration, and discovery, how through the Deres, Darshonim, people, Talmidim, have found the gate of entry to the more universal idea. It's universal in terms of Torah universal, but the particularity of the gate of entry comes through a connection to some events that are during the course of proximity to the Parsha. We see the rampant, irrational anti-Semitism that has emerged, surfaced, and is burgeoning around the world. Starts on one level, on an academic, intellectual level sometimes, and then spreads to the know-nothings, to the illiterates who translated into gross bestiality. But the flow continues. It's a regular, recurring kind of a phenomenon throughout history. So right now we see this anti-Semitism. And we're at Parshas Balak again. And Balak sends his WhatsApp, his email to Bilam, and invites Bilam to come curse the Jewish people. What's Balak's problem with the Jewish people? Pasuk says that Balak's text read, Am Yotzam Mitzrayim, a people left, they went out of Mitzrayim, and they have a Chisa Seinoos, they're covering the appearance of the land. Simplest translation, most understood that to mean there's so many of them you cannot see the ground. He begrudged the population growth in Klal Yisrael. Tiftach Pelasot. I'll call upon him. So the Sfasemis has, in a few words, just has a take on this verse, B'chisos ein ort, which opens up another dimension of appreciation of the source of so much of anti-Semitism in history, and the irrational commitment has its source in a kind of need. Says the Sasemis that these Jews have come along and said that the material universe is a resource for spirituality. It's an instrument, and it houses, is interwoven, is seeded, is filled through with spirituality. And the way a human being is constructed, and the Jews leading the race towards achieving that, the parade, that the Jew understands that the material universe is a resource for an instrument, the means of getting to spirituality. But the goal is spirituality. You cannot skip that step of the instrumentality of the physical, since a human being is this subtle blend, this merging of angel and animal, and the Rebbeinu Shem has created it that way, and that's why man is called Odom. He comes from the Adama, and he has to, and the question has been asked in history, so why not emphasize the angelic part? Because the challenge, the goal, the contest is, how is man going to take the artiyut, the soil, the simple earthliness, and raise that to spirituality, utilize it. That's what free will is all about. Taking it one way or taking it another way. Says the Sfas Emes, this was the anger, the resentment of Balak, and of course he found a listening audience with Bilam. Bilam's only delay, his hesitation, is purely pragmatic of whether or not it is a propitious moment to be able to do it. Can he achieve what has been asked? Not because be'etzem essentially there's any moral issue over here. It's a question, can he do it? Can it be done, and can he do it? They've changed our attitude. We cannot simply indulge anymore in the physical universe, says Balak. And that has radically changed the hedonistic Epicurean view of reckless, random indulgence with abandon. Brings to mind, some of us have touched on this, that Hitler, Yamach Shemoy V'Zichroi, writes in Mein Kampf that the reason he took out after the Jews is they are the conscience of the world. Hein hein adon. That's what we're talking about. They are those who have brought to mind of a certain percentage of mankind consciously and many more unconsciously, that they must deal with the dimensions of spirituality that reside hidden, covered over, but gnaw away at the unconscious conscience of mankind. And the Jews are again leading the pack. They're the leadership in this. So it's this anger, this resentment that Balak is calling attention to. And it's this sense of utilizing the material as a medium of getting to where we have to go. Now, when it comes to the question of anti-Semitism, dictators have long called it to our attention, and noted it and exploited the phenomenon that if you repeat a lie frequently enough, it becomes a certain level of reality. The exposure creates its own reality. It dominates and spills over from a certain level of the mind to seep in to the unconscious as, well, maybe it's a possibility, this lie, after moving from gross mistruth, gross misrepresentation to, well, maybe it's a possibility, because a human being, again, is an emotional, physiological creature with a soul potentially available to dominate and control, discipline, direct the experiences, but more often than not, tragically enough, it's the body that dominates, the animalistic dominates the angelic in man. And so we have here this potential of resentment, of anger, that the Jews have a message to the world, and this message is a message that angers. Some of us, I believe, I've talked about it on the podcasts and some other possible platforms and forums of Ohr Somayach, maybe in some earlier shurim. Quickly, that I remember the years when I was in Brooklyn College, and we were in yeshiva in the daytime in Chaim Berlin, and many of us went to Brooklyn College in the late afternoons, early evenings, late evenings, and took courses. There weren't that many yeshiva bochurim in those years when I was there, but in subsequent years there were more. Subsequent years, one non-Jew in a class, in a math class with me, told me that he believes that Brooklyn College, you need 128 credits and 613 mitzvahs to get your BA. But it wasn't quite accurate, but that was later. But in the earlier years, there were less bochurim, and even those that were there were taking business administration or pre-accounting courses. I had gone to the classes in philosophy and sociology, psychology. I was kind of sneaking behind enemy lines to try and find out. I felt intrigued by knowing how the world viewed the world. I was dedicated to a Torah vision of life, but I felt it would be important for me to have a working understanding for myself and for communicating with others that how the world viewed the world. In any event, we were sitting around in the cafeteria. I was the only fellow with a yarmulke, and if it would come time to mincha, we didn't have minyanim available regularly in those years in Brooklyn College, and I would go over to a phone booth. So the group that we were speaking with, that were taking these courses with me, were made up of non-Jews and secular Jews. Again, I was the only fellow with a yarmulke. And the Jews were invariably sarcastic, cynical about my going into daven mincha, and the non-Jews were very respectful. It was very regular when it came to that, and similar kinds of situations that I experienced over the years, and friends of mine, others have experienced and corroborated. Now, when I get up to daven mincha, even though I have not invited any of the other Jews to come into the phone booth with me, it wasn't a rerun of Groucho Marx's phone booth with piling everybody in. But I did a solo. But the Jews would invariably have cynical cracks. Did you get a busy signal? Did you get through? Was the line clear? Was there static? The non-Jews were respectful. Why? I didn't again approach any of the Jews to daven mincha. I didn't say anything to them. I just said, "Excuse me, time for me to daven mincha." The answer is simple, because by my davening mincha, implied in my act of davening mincha is an implicit indictment of the Jew who's not davening mincha, because what I am saying implicitly, not explicitly, what I am demonstrating is a commitment to the proposition, to the premise that a Jew should daven mincha. And therefore, it provokes a certain kind of defensiveness amongst those that don't daven mincha, don't want to daven mincha, and don't want to know why somebody davens mincha. And so there is that kind of a of a response, and we have then an emerging kind of a Jewish complicity in the anti-Semitism that is shocking for many, but not so shocking, equally tragic for all, that recurs again and again in Jewish history. The Netziv points out that when the Jews originally settled in Mitzrayim and Eretz Goshen, they became very prosperous, and they were building their communities, but it was a kind of golden ghetto. It was successful, a velvet-lined ghetto, but it was successful, and the Jews began to move out, b'soich, mitoich, Yurush, the rest of Mitzrayim. Those who attained to a certain level of prosperity and sought after upgrading their sense of dignity to become like the non-Jews that were there. There's the Mitzrayim, the external Mitzrayim, and the Mitzrayim from within that has Jews submitting again and again in history to the dominant perception of them as Jews and absorbing that into their self-image. The captive being accommodating his self-perception to the perception that his captors have of him. Psychological phenomenon that has been noted and written about much through history. Medrash, in fact, relates the Medrash on the dinim of Bechor, primogeniture, that even if somebody has two wives and one wife is more beloved, he cannot skip over the son who is the firstborn of his firstborn of the wife who is less beloved. Similarly, the Jews are the Bechor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Meir Simcha explains, what does it mean the Jews are the Bechor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the firstborn? Just like a Bechor changes the status of the parent, this man has till now not been a father. Now he has become another different way of experiencing the world, life, and his participation in history. He's a Bechor. Meir Simcha says that is why the Jews are called B'ni B'chori. The Ben Hashem says the Jews are the Bechor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because as the Bechor, the firstborn, renders the father a father, and then Klal Yisrael brought monotheism to the world, a sense of a one God unifying the totality of creation with history and mankind's place in a world that the resources have been given and the freedom of choice, so much, of course, that we don't have choice about, but within the context of that which is our test, we do have choices to make. So, Klal Yisrael, the Rabbi Shmuel Rozovsky Zatzal, the Panovich Rosh Yeshiva, would point out that the father has to have hakoras hatov, a sense of gratitude towards this son who has now changed his status. He has a child, and he has a status that is changed his reality, because now this father can sit on a Sanhedrin. Two candidates for sitting on the Sanhedrin, both eminently scholarly. One has a son, one doesn't have it, one has a child, one doesn't have a child, and the one with the child can sit in the center, and the one without the child cannot. Why? Because he doesn't know what mercy is. Somebody breaks out of himself to be able to not just sympathize, but empathize with another who is him and isn't him simultaneously. And so it's changed his status. That again, the reality of the psychological infrastructure of human personality, that root reality which helps us, guides us in our subjective perception, that it's our mitzvah and our climb to objectify as much as possible, but to value the subjective elements of it, but see them as such, not to deny them, to see them as such. And so, Klal Yisrael, as leading world history towards this conception that the physical universe is a medium, an instrumentality, and the resentment, the anger, the frustration that they've changed our perception of the world. It fits very well then that the donkey that speaks is that we have our law of parsimony. The Rebbeinu Shalom does not waste a miracle, and so if there's a miracle that this female donkey speaks, then why? What it was necessary for? Because if the Rebbeinu Shalom is giving the power of prophecy to a Gentile prophet in order to create a certain sense of egalitarian, equal opportunity that the non-Jewish world had to utilize the potential genius of man, the potential creativity of man, man's ability to bridge between the finite and the infinite, to conceive of the infinite, and to bring it, his relationship, to bridge from the finite to the infinite in a real way in his life, real meaning in a way that he can digest and integrate into his behavioral norms. So man has, what do we need this miracle for? Crucial part of the difficulty that Bilam and Balak had, one, the sense of resentment and anger about indulging. Two, is their egoistic sense of themselves as being special, their self-image, and the refusal to subordinate their egos to the will of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Whatever hesitation Bilam has and delays are purely pragmatic. He doesn't know if it's a propitious moment, if he can do it, if he can pull it off, but not the morality of it. That's never his issue. And so the donkey is given the power of speech. So that's what's so special about man. Man can take ideas and translate them, the purely spiritual, intellectual dimension, soul dimension of man, and bring them into this earthly existence through the power of speech. So the Rebbeinu Shalom says to Balak, to Bilam, that I've given this power to man. That was the inception. Adam Rishon, had the failure not occurred, that was the nefesh chaya. Man had the spirit of life. Ruach memalala, says the Onkelos, had the power of speech. That's what differentiates between man and the animals. Yes, we know that there are certain communication levels between birds and monkeys and whales, but that's not speech. It's not the bridging and the complexity of embracing ideas that transcend the limitations of where your fingers and your nose ends. That beyond that, to help you be a part of the past and a part of the future. And so the Rebbeinu Shem says to Bilam, yes, you've been given this opportunity to establish a certain kind of fair employment regulation, that non-Jews also had this in history. Did they utilize it correctly? No. Tragically, unfortunately. And so the Rebbeinu Shem says, I'll help put you back into your place by giving this power of speech to a donkey. It's part of the message that the Rebbeinu Shem gave that power of speech. It wasn't something that you earned, that you deserved. You were given certain koiches hanefesh, talents, abilities, and now they are being exploited, abused in a purely negative, immoral fashion. And so a donkey speaks. A donkey, chamor, the root form, chomer, a beast of burden, material, chomer, exclusively the tangibility of the material universe, devoid of any spirituality, any connection to something beyond. And so this is part of what it's about. And Bilam continues, Hein am levoda yishkon. They were supposed to dwell as separate people, and the Baal Shem Tov says that is what it's going to be. They will dwell as separate people. Now accept it as either a privilege or it's going to happen as persecution, lo aleinu. But one way or another, that's what's going to be. Hein am levodo yishkon. They shall dwell as separate people. And Maral points out that Hein, in our counting systems, other systems have been tried, but in the decimal system has captured the imagination of mankind and is the most accepted. Is the 5 can only be, is the unnumber between 1 and 5. You can only add 5 to a 5 to get to 10, the next juncture in the decimal system. And to get to 100, again, 50 and 50, that a Jew can only be added to another Jew to make the minyan, to make this people who have been given another kind of level of spiritual energy to help bring mankind to where they should be. But they're a bchor, and they've been endowed with another level of energy, dimension, potential passion. Perhaps part of our clue, our window in to view this, is the frequency with which Jews are secular Jews, Jews who have ostensibly abandoned their sense of being part of this mission statement of Am Yisrael in the world. Even they, more often than any other single population, are extraordinarily devoted, obsessed almost, with a sense of tikkun olam, of bringing about a corrective for idealizing the behavior of man, of creating a kind of utopian existence. So often, too often, most often misguided by the Jew who's abandoned, who's pulled up the anchor. He's no longer in the harbor of the Beis Medrash, of the Limud HaTorah, and so he's drifting, but looking, unable to deny that sense of commitment to this ideal. Perhaps it's not accidental that so often that we come out in around the time of Yeshivat Ohr Somayach, because Yeshivat Ohr Somayach in many Meforshim talk about the breaking of the Luchos, which Moshe Rabbeinu took the initiative, and the Rebbeinu Shalom endorsed, recognized that initiative as having, though not initially commanded to do so, it was the right move. Asher Shibarta, that the Rebbeinu Shalom, that was Yasher Koyach Shesher Shibarta, that an appreciation that it was now being endorsed. And Rameh Simcha explains that the reason that Moshe Rabbeinu, prime reason Moshe Rabbeinu broke the Luchos, is that there's nothing in the material universe that is holier than the Luchos at that point, and the lettering in the first Luchos were miraculously there, without the mirror image visible from each side as looking from the front, and that physical reality, a material reality, holier than anything in the world at that moment, the Rebbeinu Shalom endorses Moshe Rabbeinu's initiative to demonstrate to Klal Yisrael that there's nothing to traumatize them into recognition as a rebuttal to the creation of the Egel HaZohav, of a golden calf, to recognize that there's nothing in the material world that is a necessary prerequisite for my relationship to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Will I want to use? Of course. It's all about, as we said earlier, it's all about utilizing the material universe. But my relationship to the Rebbeinu Shalom is given the resources within the halachic norms, how I go about doing it, why, when, according to the criteria of the halacha. That is, man is also, he's a medaber and he's a holech. He's a creature that moves from situation to situation. And Rameh Simcha says, Klal Yisrael had to witness that it's possible to go on without these first luchos. We'll get second luchos. We'll do what has to be done. And now there'll be a new relationship to the luchos. It will be through the Medrash teachers, through the medium of the Torah Shebal Peh, the oral law, which now will be always there, but now in a different form that we will have to develop, just as the second luchos were carved by Moshe Rabbeinu. The Torah Shebal Peh now will have to be carved out of the stone, out of the tangibility, out of the experience of man in interacting with the infinity, the transcendence of the encounter at Sinai. And so this sense of even the most celestially elegant spirituality in its physical form is subject to the criteria of the judgment of the halacha as applied in the universe. And so, Am Yotzei Mitzrayim, the Chisas Ein Ha'aretz, they've covered changed our attitude towards the material universe. Yes, that's what it is, a medium for attaining to spirituality. And there'll be an anger, a resentment at Am Yisrael if you're bringing this message, repeating this message, demonstrating this message, proving it again and again by our mere existence in El Yisrael after so much privation, persecution, and suffering, coming back and revitalizing the sense of simcha and joy at the Rebbeinu Shalom having chosen Am Yisrael as B'ni B'chori, my firstborn. Chazak v'amatz, we should all experience Yeshuas u'refuas and have the schus to continue the demonstrating the chibur, the connection of how to use the medium of the material for accessing its spirituality. Yeshua's refuahs, b'seres teves to everybody. Chazak v'amatz, kol tu.